Morgan Rogers is the name that has been floating around out there, quotes of 80 to 100 million pounds. Aston Villa in the Europa League got a big 3-1 win last night in Bologna. And I think they really do look like one of the more likely teams to go and potentially win that competition. This is a big game for them. They've got over the line in the first leg. You would expect them to wrap it up in the second. They then play, I think, Nottingham Forest or Porto in the semi-finals, and then a final, Unai Emery in the Europa League in a final. If they get there, you would fancy Aston Villa to go and win that. And then that could be Villa's path to Champions League football. It really could be. They might come sixth. They might drop down in the league table, but they could still get their way into the Champions League through the Europa League. They need it. They really do, because they're one of many clubs themselves. Newcastle, Tottenham potentially as well, Chelsea potentially as well, all in danger of really suffering if they don't make Champions League football next season. And we don't know exactly how it's going to go, but Villa will really be looking to try and get that money and get in the Champions League next season. Otherwise, they could be selling some big names. And Morgan Rogers, according to the Times anyway, could be one of those names on the way out. And I don't know whether it's regardless of whether they make Champions League or not, but Villa's need to sell, I think, will be a lot greater if they don't get in the Champions League next season. The story in the Times said on Thursday afternoon, Morgan Rogers looks likely to be at the centre of a transfer tug-of-war between Arsenal, Manchester United and Chelsea after they all renewed their interest. He's 23 years old still. 23 years old, so a good age, a good player to pick up, and has scored 24 goals and claimed 23 assists across competitions since the start of last season. I think he's had a bit of a dip this year, but I think there was one game against Arsenal, wasn't the game that they won earlier this season against them, I think it was the season before, where I saw Morgan Rogers absolutely tearing through Arsenal's midfield and carrying the ball like nobody's business, and I thought, that there is a real player. Villa have, according to the report, fought hard to keep him last summer. Chelsea wanted him. Arsenal have wanted him before. He's contracted till 2031 and have not put in a release clause into his contract. But they're looking at 80 million quid, likely exceeding 80 million, because they have a transfer sell-on clause that they will need to pay for Middlesbrough. Morgan Rogers did play for Middlesbrough when Michael Carrick was Middlesbrough manager as well. So Michael Carrick does know him quite well and has spoken about him in this role at Manchester United previously as well. I think in the lead up to the Aston Villa game, he did speak out about him and how good he's been doing. But Villa are one of those teams that really require, I think they're right on the edge of squad costs, and they're not one of those clubs that draws in loads and loads of revenue because they are one of the so-called big clubs and they have a massive stadium like United do, like, Tottenham do, like Arsenal do. So they need to succeed on the pitch, really, to justify the costs. And if they don't get into those European competitions, the top one, the Champions League, there may be a need to raise money through other means. And Villa posted losses of 120.3 million in the 2022-23 season and 85.9 million in 23-24. But Morgan Rogers is one of those players, really, who maybe do a step up at some point. United's name is inevitably been linked in this report. Now, what do I think about this? If we're looking at 80 million quid, if we're looking at knowing that United need to sign a left winger, if we're looking at 80 million quid, you would think that you can earmark that kind of money for a player at age 23 on the cusp of the England team, will probably go to the World Cup, Premier League proven. You would think that, hey, that's really a player that Manchester United should be looking at. 80 million quid is probably the outlay they'll put on a top quality left winger if they were to go and get one. I know I've talked about Yandy Amande in the recent past, and I've talked about that number potentially being put up for a player like him. I think RB Leipzig are looking at 100 million euros, which equates to something similar to the 80 million pounds or whatever. Morgan Rogers, for me, though, I don't see the sense in this one. I really don't. I mean, look, we don't know exactly if Manchester United want this. I think this is it's a report from the Times, right, which has linked a bunch of clubs to a player that may be looking to move on and take the next step because Aston Villa may need to sell, or because he has higher aspirations of playing elsewhere. But I look at the squad fit for Manchester United, I look at the type of player that Morgan Rogers is, and while he is a fantastic player, I really like him. He's, like I say, he's been blown hot and cold a little bit this season, but when he's played for England, he's looked really important. And I think there was even a conversation at some point a few months ago that he could actually start for ahead of Jude Bellingham at the World Cup for England under Thomas Tuchel as well. He is that good. But I don't think this makes sense, actually, for Manchester United to go and actually pursue this, because we know the focus on the midfield area, 2 players, potentially more than that, who are going to be coming into the midfield. And I'm looking at potentially, as we said, me and Jamie the other day on the podcast, around about £150 million of a transfer spend on the midfield alone for 2 players, like 2 top quality players, the likes of Elliot Anderson, Sandro Tonali, and then there may be others who are, Adam Wharton's name is always there as well. There's been some talk this week about players being priorities and Elliot Anderson potentially choosing Manchester City. I would say don't get too drawn in to just drip-fed updates every single day until you get something actually conclusive. You don't need to hear about everything that Manchester United are doing to know that they are doing things. It's very important to stress that. Don't lose your head. I've seen some people on social media over the last few days losing their heads because they don't know if Manchester United are actually working in the background. Could just be that they're working in the background and not telling anybody about it. That's quite important. Stealth in the transfer market is quite important. I would like Manchester United to actually act like that, but their name has been linked to Morgan Rogers here. And while I think he's a good player, while I think he's got all of the tools ready to continue succeeding in the Premier League, and it said here that he's open to leaving and United and Arsenal want to strengthen on the left flank this summer, it doesn't make sense to me because I just see him as, if I can make a comparison, it's a Cunha alternative, really. And what you're looking at in a left winger that you want to buy is somebody of a different skill set, somebody with, I would say, electric pace, really good, tricky footwork, can stand up a man and run past him in a second, and can be that kind of difference maker. And while Rodgers is that, I think his profile, his size, his speed, his ability to carry the ball, I think I would just put him more in the... He's very much like an alternative to Matheus Cunha in a sense. I don't see him as an out-and-out left winger. I've got to be honest, I think he's one of those left wing, or can play on the right sometimes as well, left wing number 10 kind of hybrids. And you've got Bruno Fernandes already, you've got Mason Mount in there, who I don't think United are going to be able to shift on this summer. You have got Cunha as well, who, while been playing on the left side this season, in certain points, and especially under Michael Carrick with Patrick Dorgu being out, I think that's just the same profile of player, really, that you're getting. You don't want to double up on that. You want something, a bit of a jack in the box, something a bit different. And I think Morgan Rogers isn't different enough for me in terms of the profile that he is to justify the cost that United would have to spend on him, given they've already got all of those options already. I would much prefer, like I say, if United are going to go for a left winger and bring in a big name or spend a lot of money, they need to have that electric pace, that great footwork. Maybe you're looking at like a left winger who can also play on the right, and I would have no issue with it. Like, I don't think United really need one of those who can play on the right, given they're well stocked with Mbeumo, Shea Lacey, and Ahmad as well. But, you know, that kind of flexibility. I don't want another left wing number 10 hybrid, a player that ideally wants to play through the middle. It doesn't make sense to me. I think ideally you want a player, if you're going to go and spend that money, to sit on the left side and be absolutely happy there. You've got Dorgu, who is going to potentially offer, when he's back, that left-footed ability to cross in and beat players down the line. I want to see that out of Dorgu. You've got Cunha, who's a completely different type of option out there as well, who likes to cut in and drift in and affect the play around the edge of the box. I think you've got 2 different players there who give you different options, but you don't really have that tricky winger like I was just talking about earlier. Cunha's not a winger. I don't think Cunha's a winger. I think Rodgers is very much, I would put him in the same box as Matheus Cunha, and I think Cunha is technically a better player as well. Now, Rodgers has plenty of room to grow, obviously, and it would be a big thing if any of those clubs that I mentioned, Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester United potentially as well, it'd be a big thing for any of those clubs to go and get him. I just don't think it's the right squad fit and the right spend of the money that United will have this season. And we talked up potentially a £250 million transfer budget that United would have this summer on the last podcast as well, if they get Champions League money that they could go and spend this year. I think while that sounds like a lot of money, it doesn't actually stretch that far if you're looking at top quality targets. So I would like United to Well, while it's inevitable their name is going to be linked with players like this, I don't see this as likely at the moment. And if it does develop into something, then we will see what happens, and I'll come to you with more. But let me know your thoughts on Morgan Rogers. I like him as a player. I really, really do. He's thrilling to watch at times, especially when he's in it and at his pomp. He is fantastic. He's really difficult to play against. I just don't think the makeup and his abilities as a player is really the right match for what Manchester United are looking for on that side, out on the left. If Bruno Fernandes decides that he wants to go, which I don't think will happen still, by the way, if that happens and he decides he wants to go, maybe the conversation changes, and I'll definitely revert back to and probably change my opinion on this. But for now, it's a no from me on Morgan Rogers. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section as well.